Hi all, I have another exciting game to show you from TSEC Season 17 Super Final. This is in round 96. Leela was playing white against Stockfish playing black. Now Leela, by the way, I made inquiries and Okirex Amphub has clarified AlphaZero was on a 20 by 256 neural network. T30 and 240 were actually the same size networks, so the bigger the size network, the more training it's needed. So they were also on 20 by 256. T60 is 24 by 320, so it takes a lot longer to train. And the nets in this tournament are actually based on the T60. Well, they get the game training, and they're actually even bigger at 30 by 384. So yeah, they're quite big neural networks, bigger than to train than AlphaZero even. So just for those interested in that part of the technology here. So anyway, let's have a look. So Leela playing white, E4. So not only a highly evolved Leela, but also a very, very big network. So E6, the French defense. Now Leela has traditionally been absolutely superb against the French defense. Even T20 was slightly good. T40 brilliant against the French, especially. T60 absolutely could write books on the French defense. So is this going to be different in this game? We see D4, D5, the advanced French, B6, and this is the end of the book given. This has been seen in one or two high-level French defense games. Now here, Leela actually innovated with H4. And in one sense, this echoes a kind of an advanced overprotection strategy. One of the more esoteric concepts of Nimzowitsch in my system was the overprotection of the E5 square. But I really think this is a very interesting game to check that out. If you're going to overprotect E5 and say you have a bishop later coming to F4, you want to stop G5. There could be some downsides to take out. So think about the overprotection of E5 principle here. The idea of having a central point where your pieces grip is to kind of make sure the opponent hasn't got counterplay. And if you've got a lot of pressure behind this pawn, if they play something like F6, usually you could just take and then win E6, for example. So putting huge amounts of pressure on a central point is a very, very interesting concept. And this is relevant towards that. Often knight F3 in over-the-board games has been played. For example, Svidler against Rustamov in Germany 2004 saw knight F3. So this is very, very interesting, and okay, it ended in a win for Svidler in 32 moves. We can have a quick flick through. So the exchange of the light square bishop, maybe it weakens black on the light squares, and it looks like pretty classical kind of approach to the position. But white, even here, in this example, has a strong grip on E5, and nice tactic there from Svidler, because that rook's loose, bishop takes A5, and black had enough here. The queen's protecting B1, yeah. So the rook's never really got coordinated there. So it can be disastrous, the scenery. But anyway, H4 here, and we have C5. Now we're really leaving a lot of the over-the-board world with this C5 move. A well-known French defense expert, Raphael Varganian, played Queen D7 here. And he drew a game in Dordrecht 1999 against Movsian 2650. So that was a very, very high level game, and Varganian was 2605. So that ended in a draw. I'm not going to show you that game. It was 62 moves, but it was with Queen D7. So here we see C5 from Stockfish. C3, knight C6. Which kind of abandons the idea of bishop a6. I mean, tactically, this is not possible here anyway after c3. That's a kind of, very well-known trap. If you play this bang, and then there's queen a4 check, winning that knight. So that's not the idea. Knight c6. So Stockfish is left with this potentially bad bishop. Knight f3, bishop d7. Bishop d3, queen c7. White castles. Now, even with the pawn on h4, you might find this surprising. C takes, and here is the real gambit for overprotection of E5. I think Nimzowitsch would find this absolutely fascinating. White doesn't take necessarily back on D4 necessarily. Sorry, that's a bit of a hint. What would you play here with white? Okay, I mean, there's issues that may crop up anyway, like knight b4 immediately if c takes. But we have this move bishop f4, which is kind of gambiting potentially a pawn. a6, and surely now white has to do this, c takes. But Stockfish again thinks, protecting e5. No, I don't know. Stockfish seems to have, Nimzovich my system built into it now by this stage. Yeah, and he's playing very dynamically, aggressively for this concept of e5 overprotection. We have actually Stockfish playing, believe it or not, a3, basically saying there's going to be no knight b4, no use of b4 from black, and if I take, it's going to be under great conditions. And Stockfish here did accept the kind of positional gambit: d takes c3, knight takes c3, and to me, honestly, I think this is very troublesome for black, this gambit here already. It's maybe technically it looks as though, black's a pawn up. But in terms of the bind, in terms of the strong point, stranglehold, strong point, it looks fantastic for white here. b5, we have rook c1 and now queen b6. And here, bishop e3, a very, very interesting tempo gaining move, tactically justified. The queen stumbles back to b8. On d4, then knight takes is possible with the idea of bishop e4. So exposing an attack on the knight and the rook. And this leads to white having a dominating position. Look at these bishops in the centre. Very, very impressive. White's better there. And queen d3, for example, went much better there. So we have queen b8. Rook e1. So this pawn looks it's too dodgy to even contemplate with the king in the centre. Forget it. Knight ge7 was played, and we have b4, and it looks as though black's getting locked down on both sides of the board. Lockdown is not a very fun word at the moment with the coronavirus, but yeah, it looks as though black's getting locked down. Excuse the terminology. h6, h5. Any notion of g5 is suppressed. Queen b7, bishop f4, we have rook c8, queen d2, rook c7, bishop g3. So this immense stranglehold over e5, and in fact, e5 was the key example given by Nimzovich, I think for good reason. It leans over the king side. Often when black's castling on the king side, it's very dangerous for black's king safety. If black's not castling king side here, the rooks are permanently in disarray. They're not going to be coordinating that easily. Whilst the white rooks, by contrast, could build up. They could double, potentially. We have rook g8, rook c2, rook c8, now knight e2. And this gives the idea that, in fact, in this position, there is the undertone of playing for f4, f5. If a knight's entrenched on d4 here, it's putting pressure on e6. If we have pressure on e6 and b5, it means there's two strategic breaks that black will have to be worried about if there's a nice knight perched on d4. There's a4 at any point, and there's also f4, f5 in principle. If the pawn chain is undermined, then there's the f-file, and e6 has to be constantly guarded expensively by the bishop on d7. So there's positional pressure building up, basically, after knight fd4 here. So one pair of rooks coming off, and now bishop h7. That looks like a nuisance move. Why play this? And Lila's toying around, but f4 now, just keeping the bishop on h7 for a moment. Knight takes, queen c8, and now just not minding the queen's coming off and being a pawn down. Knight c6, bishop f2, and not minding even the knight's coming off, but knight b8 was played. If knight takes d4, bishop takes, this position looks as though white is having a whirl of a time here. with entry point on c7 and f5 coming, it looks as though the black king might even be in a horrible crossfire. You can imagine f takes, bishop g6, and rook c7, and a disaster ensues after that. It looks horrible anyway. So we have knight b8, not wanting this exchange of knights. Bishop d3, bishop e7, rook infiltrates, king d8. The rook doesn't plunge into a7 here. It looks as though it might be kind of trapped, but concretely, as Stockfish will say, well, white's maintaining a slight edge, but I'm not really sure if this offers any prospects if the rook's really stuck there. Is it? I don't really see how it's gonna get out of this mess on a7. So sensibly, it seems that the rook retracts to c2. Okay, king e8, and now g4. So this strategic plan is in full force with f5. We have rook g8, king g2, king d8, king g3. So what does this king walk represent? I mean, maybe, sometimes maybe king h3, bishop h4 if white really wanted to exchange off bishops. Sometimes the king's going to be active in this endgame. We have rook h8, rook c1, rook g8. So Stockfish has reduced to passivity here. We have bishop g1. This retreat is fascinating. And it provokes a committal move. Pawns don't go backwards, g6. If rook h8 here, then maybe white does inflict f5. And for example, this, just as an example, shows that white can potentially get a bishop to d6 sometimes and play this a4 even here. If a bishop's guarding b4, and you can see that if takes, then bishop takes in a big passed pawn. With the rook there, this looks even worse than usual, and the bishop pointing at the queening square. So this a4 looks like a killer positional move, and black should start crumbling here in this kind of scenario, even persisting an advantage even to rook and pawn endings. So it looks pretty horrendous that if g6 isn't played, white's going to have an active plan here anyway. So we have this committal g6 that's taken, and yes, e6 is now only protected by the bishop. Bishop e3, and now another committal move, h5. And now, instead of taking, which might liberate some of the opponent's pieces, we have g5 just further clamping down black's pieces. It looks as though this might even be plausible, though, to take. You might think, is this too much activity? But after f5, this kind of thing, it seems as though white can even get a winning advantage here. So there might be more than one way of winning this at this point, but g5 was the one chosen by Leela. It looks the more kind of sadistic, just hemming in these bishops. A very AlphaZero style. It seems as though the neural networks love hemming in bishops in general. The bishops are kind of very straightforward, very predictable, always staying on their side of the colours, as if a car staying on the side of the road is a policy. Very predictable, and they're hemmed in. So king e8, rook c7, king f7, and this bishop drops back, taking time, it seems, to see what black's doing. Rook d8. But there's another aspect here at work. The bishop is more flexible. It can go to a2 if needed, and it's targeting g6. And this means actually this knight reroute is possible. The knight could come like this and hit g6 as well. We have knight f3. Not only that, though, knight f3 doesn't just revolve around knight h4 here. It also unleashes bishop a7 potentially, to take on b8, which then would win d7. So this position looks rather dreadful for black. We have this desperate looking pawn sack, so Stockfish is starting to self-explode, it seems, with d4. But yeah, if we look at rook g8, then bishop a7, yes, forget about knight h4. I know the rook's trying to do a job with g6 as well, but it can't handle both, it seems. Black's in overload, so that would just be winning material. And, if knight c6, then that d7 bishop can be taken. So, yes, it's pretty miserable there. So, d4, knight takes. So, white now has restored pawn material equality, equal on pawns. But with the rook on c7, this dominating knight, you can see all of white's pieces look superior to black's counterparts. Pick a piece and then look at the counterpart. This is much better than that. This is much better than that. This is kind of much better than that. That's much better than that. I mean, the king is even better than that. I mean, the pawns are more aggressive. It's just everything about white's position is qualitatively better now. So a big return on investment for the initial dynamic pawn sack in the opening. Rook c8, we have rook b7. This permitted rook activity, well, it's not permitted, is it? The rook's just going to have to go back after if rook c3, king f2. How is the knight going to be protected? So we have rook d8, black not bothering. Just to put it on the board concretely though, just king f2, and the rook has to go back. And then say knight f3, and here there's tactics like bishop takes g6. e7 will be loose potentially, or just this. White's got a big advantage there. So we have rook d8, bishop e4, so taking even more control over the position. We have rook e8, king f2, h4, another desperate ploy by black. It seems Stockfish is just fed up and depressed with the position and wants to start giving up pawns. We have king g2, rook c8, bishop f2, bishop e8, and Leela doesn't even want to take this pawn immediately. He just plays rook b6. Bishop takes h4 does seem plausible, at least on the depth of analysis I'm using. It looks as though there's nothing that's really going to happen to the white position. White's going to have a big advantage there. So rook b6, bishop d7. We have king h2, a5. So again, on this side of the board now, Stockfish is using its available pawn moves, even if they lose pawns temporarily. Here, a bit of bishop activity, you can argue. At what price, though? It's at the price of a pawn, knight takes b5. So black is now officially a pawn down. We have king g8, knight d6, rook f8, and the rook is still tied down on that first rank. Bishop e3 protecting f4. Bishop c6. We have bishop takes c6. So knight takes. We have knight e4. The knight's going to be entrenched on f6 here, potentially, after the rook exchange. But bishop f2, wanting to win maybe another pawn, to be 2 pawns up. Yes, it looks to be all over. Bar the shouting, 2 pawns up here. I mean, let's play through the moves. Stockfish is really running out of resources here to play with. So the king coming over here for a moment, and then playing around a bit. Leela's playing around a bit. This passed a pawn looks ominous as well. Knight coming back to the centre, and the knight centralising, dancing around. a5. Okay, check. And actually, at this point, by the way, Stockfish are, I think, in severe time trouble. Look at this point, move 93. After knight e2, this bishop is actually trappable. You can imagine the king coming back and just munching the bishop. Yeah, it's not really going anywhere. The bishop is kind of trapped on h2 here. Yeah. And Leela's about to... yeah, okay. I don't want to make any analogies to anything here, actually, but it seems as though the bishop's trapped. Let's just leave it like that. It's not as if a spider's eating its prey. No, I don't want to make any analogies like that. So anyway, so the bishop's trapped and just coming in. f5. Okay, and now yeah, this is just trivially won. I think Leela knows, unfortunately for Stockfish, how to win the knight and bishop endgame. And anyway, it was auto resigned here. So both sides thought it was huge. I mean, they both have table bases now anyway. I don't think there's any doubt Leela's going to mate with knight and bishop if the game continued. Say, you know, knight takes, king takes. This is just winning for white. Yes. So the game actually ended here. And I found it impressive. But there's other very, very impressive games to check out, which I do want to do. TSEC is over by this point, 96, round 96. Yeah, Leela won the whole thing, TSEC champion this year. Fantastic achievement for the Leela team. The traditional strengths in certain openings persists and just made even better. The traditional weaknesses persist, like in the black side of Shigorin. For some reason, that's outside of the scope of any leader training, or maybe it's just too bad. It's too good for Stockfish. The strengths and weaknesses of both engines are reflected and tested by these opening start positions. So great credit to the TSEC and Jerome for his picks, and they're also culturally and historically significant picks for the openings, as well as testing strengths and weaknesses of these engines. I thoroughly enjoyed the chat, and still do. You can still go to TSEC Chess waiting for the next event. So it's great lively chat throughout the day, tsec-chess.com. And fantastic, experience and fun to be had at TSEC, as this tournament shows. If you want to challenge me for a game, kingscrusher.tv or bit.ly/chessworld, and if you register that, I'll be able to invite you for a game shortly after. There's my Suave chat room, kingscrusher.tv/discord. There's some playlists to check out. There is a Stockfish playlist, so it's bit.ly/Leela Chess or Stockfish Chess as well, bit.ly/Magnus Carlsen Chess. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this. Comments, questions, likes, shares, subscribes, all appreciated. Thanks very much.